turn to our top story, that news that 6 people have been killed, 3 attackers also shot dead by police. Of course, emergency services still at the scene. Naga is there for us, but I just want to touch on some of the context to this. With me is Afshin Shahi. He's a security and terrorism expert. Afshin, good to see you. Let's talk first of all about how this attack unfolded. 10:08 last night, the first calls to the police. On one hand, a relatively primitive attack. It was a van ploughing into pedestrians on the bridge, and then, of course, within the market itself, knife attacks. But at the same time, relatively organised, because we believe there are 3 attackers.
Yes, and of course, when you look at exactly what happened last night, it seems that it is very consistent with some of the other atrocities that we have seen, certainly in the UK. Of course, this event seems to be more organized, but at the same time, when you look at exactly what happened last night, is kind of very consistent with what happened in March in the same place in London. And of course, at this stage, it is very difficult to speculate, although it is very tempting. And of course, I don't want to speculate. Over the last few hours, I have been kind of looking at the social media, looking at various kind of platforms that primarily the Islamic State kind of uses, or looking at kind of the accounts, Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts that are kind of affiliated to the organization, and nobody has taken kind of or claimed any responsibility. Nonetheless, a lot of their supporters are kind of celebrating about what happened last night. So I don't want to speculate. But again, as I mentioned early on, when you kind of look at the wider picture, it looks very consistent. And the other point that I need to raise is what they have been telling us themselves over the last couple of weeks. Just before the month of Ramadan, in their kind of a magazine, Al-Rumiyah, the current spokesperson for the organization, Al-Muhajirun, mentioned that basically they're going to use the holy month of Ramadan to intensify their activities.
And also a lot of parallels with the holy month last year as well. In 2016, we saw a lot of similar attacks during the month of Ramadan.
Before the holy month of Ramadan last year, the previous spokesperson for the organization, Muhammad Al-Adnani, kind of said that they're going to use the month of Ramadan to intensify their activities. And unfortunately, as the result of that, over 5,000 people were either killed or injured across the globe. If you remember what happened in Florida, what happened in Bangladesh, and so many other countries, like over 5,000 people, unfortunately, were kind of injured or killed during the month of Ramadan. And now, exactly at the same time this year, the current spokesperson said exactly the same thing and asked their supporters that if they can't actually make it to the battlefronts in Syria and Iraq, they should use any tool that they have at their disposal to randomly attack people. And of course, this type of attack is extremely, extremely effective because it is very, very difficult to prevent 100%. And at the same time, it can create maximum fear and maximum destruction with very little resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you touched on, the 3rd terror attack in the UK since March, bearing a lot of the same hallmarks as that one earlier in the year at Westminster, but very different, of course, from what we saw just 2 weeks ago in Manchester.
Yes, I'm afraid there is no kind of formula, there is no pattern. When you look at, certainly when it comes to kind of the Islamic State activities in the Middle East and here in Europe, they use so many different methods and so many different kind of tools to kind of undertake that type of atrocities. And of course, at this stage, I don't want to say this was kind of conducted by the Islamic State, but it very much looks like a kind of an incident, an atrocity, which was kind of delivered and organized by the Islamic State. And even if it is not delivered or organized by the Islamic State, it's certainly inspired by the Islamic State. And it is very much consistent with some of the literature that we have been seeing coming from the so-called Islamic State over the last week about the ways in which they should use the month of Ramadan to intensify their activities to kind of maximize fear and destruction.
Okay, Afshin, thanks for explaining all of that. You're going to stay with us, more from you a little later, but for now, thanks very much. It's just approaching 5 to 8. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Naga is at London Bridge for us. Naga, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yes, I am.